time I was around 10 years old till I was around 14, my parents enrolled my brother and I in a summer camp for a month of our holidays before we went to our home country for the rest. We had a set schedule we had to follow from 9 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. We were then free to do whatever we wanted on the grounds of the summer camp until it was time to go home. At 9 a.m., we had swimming for an hour. Then starting at 10:30 a.m., we could go ice skating for a couple of hours. You could opt out of either or both, but these were the timings, and we could only do these activities during these times. Now, I love to swim, and so I never ever skipped swimming in the morning. My brother, who is almost 3 years older than me, did skip occasionally. The reason I bring this up is because the swimming pool is where our story begins. There was a lifeguard who worked at the pool. He seemed to be the highest-ranking lifeguard because he was the one giving orders most of the time. On one fateful day, when my brother decided to forego swimming, he called to me as I passed him by. Let's call him Joe. He asked me what my name was, how old I was, where I was from. I grew up in a culture that was really diligent about respecting your elders, so little 10-year-old me answered all of his questions, never thinking he could possibly have nefarious intentions, until he asked if I had a mobile phone. I didn't, so I said so, and this whole-ass, grown-ass man said,
"Well, can I have your landline number then?"
I remember feeling distinctly uncomfortable all of a sudden. I was suddenly acutely aware of his gaze on my swimsuit-clad body. Thankfully, my parents had drilled into me to never give out our number to strangers, so I mumbled a quick, "No, sorry," and ran off to play with my friends. After this initial contact, Joe only grew bolder. Whereas at first, he never dared approach me when my brother was around before, Joe started to speak to me whenever his back was turned. I tried so hard to avoid him, but he aggressively pursued me and tried to cultivate a friendship with me, as if a 10-year-old and 30-something-year-old had something to be friends over. However, I pretended not to see him when he would wave me over and never went by the lifeguard station he was at if I could help it. So he started walking over to whichever edge of the pool I happened to be resting at and starting a conversation. Or he would call me by my name, so I would be forced to stop and speak to him for fear of being rude. I still remember his reaction when I first wore a bikini to the pool. Unabashed hunger. It was disgusting, and I never wore a two-piece to the pool again. And the bastard never stopped asking for my landline number. It was every time he managed to get me to speak to him, a relentless litany of,
"Come on, aren't we friends now? I just want to chat sometimes. Let me call you and talk to you. I just want to be friends. Friends can talk to each other, can't they? We're just friends. Your parents won't mind."
If I remember correctly, I managed to avoid giving it to him that summer. But the next summer, my brother was too old to attend the camp. It was for children between 7 to 13. I attended at 14 because they made an exception for me. They would have done the same for my brother, but he didn't want to attend anymore anyway. And so, I was enrolled by myself. And that's when Joe really ramped up his harassment in his quest to get my number. It wasn't just at the pool anymore. He would stand outside the skating rink and call to me as I went by. He would find me in the arcade. He would approach me as I bought tickets for the outdoor rides. And if I so much as acknowledged him, I was stuck in a conversation with him for at least 15 minutes. It was exhausting, and he would not let up. He eventually wore me down enough that I gave in, and I told him the number to my landline. I didn't think he would have the balls to call, but call he did. Every single day, sometimes twice a day. The first time I answered, he acted quite normally.
"Hi, is this... How are you? What are you doing?"
I awkwardly answered, but my mom came into the room, and I panicked and hung up. She asked who that was. I lied and said it was the wrong number. because I felt I had done something wrong, like it was my fault this adult was pursuing me. Every phone call from then on got weirder and weirder. He would croon my name and beg me to speak to him. He'd ask me what I was doing, if my parents were home, why didn't I stop and speak to him at camp today, he missed me, etc. I learned to recognize the number, so I would just lift up the handset and put it back down. He would call back, and I would hang up. I started jumping at the sound of the phone. I'd run to get it so my parents wouldn't get to it first and find out I'd given a stranger our number. But eventually, he fucked up and got caught. He called one day when I was at camp. I don't know why he wasn't at work that day, but the supervisor came to get me. It told me not to get on the bus at the end of the day and that my father was coming to pick me up. I was super happy to hear that and sat by the office to wait. My dad arrived, ignored me completely, and stomped into the office. You could hear him yelling all the way outside. Joe was eventually called to come to the camp, and my dad yelled at him some more. It took ages, but eventually my dad came out, kissed the top of my head, and took me home. I was never told exactly what happened, but from what I understood, one of my parents, probably my mom, answered the phone. And before they could say anything, he started his usual one-sided conversation. They listened for a while, put together that it was someone who worked at the camp, and his nationality. We are Arab, and he was speaking Arabic with a distinct accent. Coincidentally, he was the only person in the camp's employ from that country, so they tracked him down easily. He wasn't fired. In fact, he still worked there when I stopped going to the camp a few years later, but he never spoke to me ever again, and thank God for that. So Joe, I hope we never meet again. You sick fuck. So this little nugget of a memory still creeps me out to this day. When I was a kid, my mom and I lived in a somewhat sucky neighborhood in Chicago. Despite the condition of the neighborhood, the apartment complex we lived in, however, was fantastic. Our top floor unit had a fireplace that saved our lives in the winter. For those that don't live in or haven't visited Chicago, the Windy City is particularly icy in colder seasons, and a nice quality considering the area, AC, that iced out the front area of the unit in the summer, but the back area, where the bedrooms were, remained hotter than Satan's armpits because of the temperature on hot, or cold, in this case, days. My mom and I would camp out in the living room to sleep on those nights. Anyway, despite the rough neighborhood, I remember having a good childhood in the short time we were there. Maybe because my mom always made sure to protect me from the parts of the neighborhood that were exceptionally rough. So, on one winter night, our apartment was freezing cold. My mom told me to grab my pillows and a blanket because we were going to have a sleepover in the living room. She popped some popcorn, made hot chocolate with no marshmallows for me, and one loaded with them for her. We ate and drank and watched Christmas movies before I passed out, clearly white girl wasted on hot chocolate. At some point in the middle of the night, I woke up to go to the bathroom and saw movement in the kitchen. I don't know if it was because I was stupid tired or oblivious to what the fuck was going on, but I called out, "Mommy?" even though she was asleep on the couch next to me. The person, who I soon realized was a guy because of his huge stature and lack of hair under the mask he wore, walked over and crouched down to eye level in front of me and whispered, "Shh." I simply shrugged, went to the bathroom, and came back to the living room to go to sleep, and that was that. The guy was no longer there, and the door was left slightly ajar. I chalked it up to one of those lucid dreams and filed it away in my repressed memories. I do, however, remember moving the next day into my grandparents' place for about a month until we found something. But because I was so young, my mom never told me why. Not until I was grown, at least. The topic of the apartment randomly came up in conversation, and I offhandedly told her about the dream I remember I had. This is the terrifying conversation that ensued. Me. Did I ever tell you about that weird dream I had? Mom. No, I don't think so. What dream? After I told her, she went pale as a ghost. Now, my mother is a dark-skinned black woman, so seeing her go pale scared the hell out of me. Mom, that wasn't a dream. That really happened. Now it was my turn to go pale. I felt my stomach fall to my ass and stared at her like, speak. Go on. Why are you silent, sis? Mom, I woke up in the middle of the night, and this man was standing above me, staring. I remember immediately demanding, "Where is my child?" I tried to get up, but he growled. Yes, growled. Then whispered angrily,
"Don't move."
At this, I started tearing up. I saw the fear in her eyes, the utter terror, thinking something had happened to her only child. I hated seeing my mom so upset. It's been just us, practically all of my life. So to imagine her having to move herself and a young girl out of a neighborhood from sheer terror is hard, to say the least. Mom, the man just continued to stare at me. He rushed out of the apartment when he heard you flush the toilet and left everything he was going to steal. The next morning, I packed up our stuff and we went to live with Nona and Papa. Child, I left all the furniture, plates, silverware, TV, etc. Just got our clothes and got the hell out of Dodge. But because we vacated the lease, it kind of effed up my credit. But I couldn't imagine sleeping in that place another night. We just sat there in silence, freaking out because my dream, which happened to actually not be a dream, was all too real. I'd say it was simply a drug addict trying to make off with some stuff. But why walk up to a child and tell her to be quiet instead of just leaving with what you already packed? Why stare at a woman, make her lie still in place, then leave when the kid comes out of the bathroom? Just why? About 8 years ago, my girlfriends and I would download Plenty of Fish and meet random guys to take exploring with us. Definitely not the smartest, especially since we were out in the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania. This one night, we met a guy. Let's call him Todd. Todd was an odd guy. He seemed socially distant. When he slid into the back of my SUV, I instantly got the feeling of regret. We were going to a place called Roney's Point, a very interesting place in West Virginia. You should look it up if you're into ghost and haunted history. Todd wanted to stay in the car for a bit to scope out the area, while us girls went ahead to explore. Red flag. I was so sure he was going to try and steal my car. We went into the abandoned hospital, and out of nowhere, here comes Todd around the corner. He scared us so bad, we let out a slight scream. Todd started making comments about how his great-grandfather was a security guard at the asylum. It's right next to the hospital, and that his grandfather told him stories about how they would shoot at the sick individuals for fun. He laughed and said,
"How much fun would that be?"
We continued to explore, and Todd just hung around in the background. We eventually left, and Todd insisted on sitting behind me in the car. I needed gas, so I started driving to the nearest gas station. Maybe 2 minutes up the winding road, I felt his slimy hands creep up and start massaging my shoulders as I'm driving. I kept leaning forward to give him the hint that I was not interested. As he's massaging my shoulders, he's telling my friends and I how stupid we are for inviting random strangers out, how we never know who is getting in our car, and how they might hurt us, etc. He started laughing again, and I will never forget the tone of his voice or the grip of his hands on my shoulders when he said,
Maybe that person's in the car with you right now.
I pulled into the gas station and demanded he got out of the car. He did, and I left him there. We got home, and my friend went on a Plenty of Fish to block him, but he already blocked her or deleted his account. We never heard from him again, but we stopped inviting random people to urban explore and ghost hunt with us. Hey friends, I just wanted to end this video by thanking you for your continued support. You all mean so much to me, and I hope that you're doing well. Please comment and like if you enjoyed. Take good care and sweet dreams.